Hi, I am Tavish Carduff here with my dad, Duffy Carduff,
Hello.
and we are here to talk about Resource Week. My dad has been with us for the last two spiritual weeks. So we talked about music and then we talked about listening, and now we move into resources, which is a little more esoteric, I guess, a little more specific to each person. So we'll get into talking about that. I want to thank you for being here and for indulging me and us listening to. We get air
Glad
conditioning.
glad to help however I can.
Thank you. One thing that we stress is kind of first how to identify yourself as a resource. So no matter where your place in life is, if you're homeless or or you have everything in the world, how do you decide where and what to give without crossing your own boundaries or making yourself uncomfortable? So I like it if you just kind of dive into like how you see that balance in your own life.
Well, going back, the thing I really remember is when I was 7 years old, my parents bought the Book of Knowledge from a traveling salesman that knocked on our front door. And the 1954 Book of Knowledge came to the house, and I was just enthralled with it. And I started reading it, and I ended up reading the whole encyclopedia when I was like 7, 8 years old. And that gave me a basis for a whole lot of stuff and a lot of knowledge that I would not have had otherwise. Most of it, a lot of it I didn't even understand at the time, but a lot of it I did. And I remember the first thing that I really picked up on from that was that there was no Santa Claus.
That
It
came
was
from
in the encyclopedia, and I took it to my mom and I said, "What is this?" And she said, "That's right, but please don't tell your sisters." And I said, "But you lied to me." And I said, "Yeah." So anyway, that gave me kind of a basis for a lot of stuff that I've used probably all through my life without even knowing about it. So, I mean, that's just a major early resource.
I think, like you, reading was a way that I kind of dove into anything around me. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have anything at our fingertips to look up what we wanted, so we were only as good as the information around us. And when you say you had an encyclopedia, I remember going to your bedroom at your parents' house, and there were so many books, and I'm sure we had a lot of books at home too.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one I remember from childhood that was a encyclopedia of diseases. It was like a medical book, and it had photos of development. It had photos of diseases. It had photos of like those are the ones that I really remember. They stick out because I did learn a lot from them, but we were only as good as the knowledge that was around us, and I think absorbing everything you can in your vicinity. When I was growing up and when you were growing up, that was what we had to do.
Well, reading was really important, and still is. I mean, I still read every single day, and we always did it as a family. I mean, we read lots of books and stories, and we always had books.
We discussed authors. We passed books around.
We did, and we still do. So, anyway, books are a huge resource.
But we've all taken that outside into our friend groups and into the people around us. And since we have a large community of people, we have certain authors that I would bet those people wouldn't have come across, or at least they came across them through us. Maybe they would have at some point on their own. But it's fun to have a whole group of artists or a voice that connects this kind of, we are connected to something bigger than ourselves, and we treat our community as family. And I feel like that's a resource I was always given in my life, even at a time when we didn't have anything. Or, I mean, that's not fair to say. There are people without anything. We didn't have a lot.
We didn't have a lot, but
we had
enough.
We did. We had
We
everything.
had what we needed.
And I, as a as we've talked about, as a teenager, I wound up being a little ego heavy, a little, needing things and brand names, and went through that phase of, but having that time period in my life to look back on and to draw on, and the things that you said to me, even though I didn't believe you then, to know how true they are now, comes full circle on this idea that if you treat everyone around you well, the universe treats you well. And that doesn't mean it doesn't give you hard things to deal with.
No, but like they say, supposedly you aren't given anything to deal with that you can't handle. So, who knows?
Even church, and that's not on our agenda to bring up, but I think about that as a resource, even though our family has come to God separate from Jesus. Would that be an accurate description?
Yeah. It's...
I don't claim Christianity anymore.
Nor do I.
But a very direct and powerful relationship with God. So
right.
Nobody needs to worry.
No, I feel that also. One of the, like you mentioned, authors. Mm-hmm. And one author that was very influential that, for me, was Kurt Vonnegut Jr. He opened my eyes in many ways, and Kurt believed in the Church of God, the totally indifferent. He said, there's a God up there watching over us, but he didn't give a shit. And I think there's some truth to that, but at the same time, I think that the goodness that you're taught from religion and treating your fellow man the right way is...
But who determines the right way?
Exactly. It's hard to say.
I liked the point that you made, that God doesn't care.
Not like we think, not like they think he does.
And I think that means God doesn't judge.
He kind of lets it happen.
We are in this human...
We have free will.
We have free will, and we are in a human body. We are individuated from God. But I think there are several places that every religion can agree on that make the claim that we are all part of God. And when we think from that space, it doesn't really matter what your religion is or how you come to know God. It's just that you do.
And it's more a feeling inside, I think, than anything.
That resource of light.
Yeah. And that was a good resource for us for... Well, we learned much, and
community.
And community, definitely.
We drew a community out of that I think we still rely on some of those people to this day.
We still have good friends from those days.
I can look back and see lessons I was taught. I can see mentors among those people. Even if they might not be my mentors today, they are different people now, just like I'm a different person now. But they did it along the way. And, to watch adults interact with each other and work as a community, and then grow up to learn their political affiliations, grow up to learn where the differences were, when as a kid all I saw were the commonalities. That was a really good perspective for me, because it didn't alienate anyone, and it didn't make all of these people this way or all of these people this way. It broadened the context that I have for what I believe any type of person to be, which is a unique individual with things in common with anyone who has a different religion or political outlook. We just all come from the same ultimate space. We just have different raw material, different values, different perspectives.
And when you're listening to different music, you get another resource from a whole nother direction. A lot of people might not look at music as a resource, but it's a tremendous resource.
It's huge. I was telling him when I first got here that I heard the song Back in the USSR by the Beatles on the way over here today. And that goes way back to my childhood. It's one of the first Beatles songs I remember connecting to. And was it the beginning of the White Album? Is it the first song?
Yeah, I think it is.
So it started, when that came on, we started the White Album. And that is an entire journey. But sitting in my car, I was able to put myself back in my old living room and dining room, as well as into my grandparents' house for a minute, and remember fabrics, couches, what things felt like. And that's just the practice of our raw material as a resource, bringing in actually a mind-body memory. I remember sitting on our couch, sitting in a chair, walking through our living room. But our arena of everything that we've been through is right there as a resource. Our own experience
Right.
is the biggest resource that we have. And it points to the things that bring us passion and purpose, which is what these spiritual weeks are about.
If you were listening at the time.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of people weren't listening at the time, and they don't have the resources that they might have had otherwise, which is sad, but a fact.
And if we can stop at sad, or we can look at the reasons why they don't or can't or won't listen. And it's generally a trigger of some sort is in the way of understanding. And when we look at the world like that, energetically, just seeing, oh, this is where this person is triggered. If we want to know why, we can always find out why. But recognizing that they are and then backing off when you see another human being triggered is a resource that's really helpful. Opening your own heart and just, hoping that they get to feel calmer, that they get to feel connected to something that isn't dragging them further into a fight or flight response, further into something that's unhealthy, just because they're triggered and can't listen.
I never really thought about that, but I think there's a lot of truth to it.
Well, so many ways that we can be a resource even when we don't have anything. Just being a listener is a resource that you can give strictly from your body. And listening to what someone says without going into your own reactions, breathing through those things helps clear your body while you are listening. And you've done your own body some good while not trying to throw your own words out there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. A lot of times the best resource of all is keeping your mouth shut.
We get...
And it's something you learn. You don't just that doesn't automatically happen. It just, you must learn that skill to keep your mouth shut, because many times it will get you in trouble. I mean, a closed mouth gathers no feet.
True. But learning when to keep your mouth shut or not is, part of the human condition. And I think it does speak to triggers. I think when we can, it's really valuable.
Right.
And when you say we must learn, I mean, it would be great if we all could. And if we could imagine that for everybody, fantastic. But the expectation that we do, that's tough. Right now, when the world is on fire, basically. Literal fires. Our weather, our collective weather has gotten wild.
That it has.
The popping off of energies as human beings can't handle the stuff around them, can't handle their feelings, can't handle their experience when, we really have tools in place to calm all these things down, to calm ourselves down, to understand why the things around us happen, so that we can just allow them to experience. And instead of feeling like we should or must overcome conflict, just being really ready to handle it, being prepared to do what is necessary to get through emotion, and not have it stick. Can't even talk through that without the emotion sticking.
Well, we've had some really bad leaders lately, and a lot of people have followed those bad leaders, and that's a lot of where it's put us these days. And
So
I don't know what you do about that.
when you say bad leader, we look at the breakdown of our. I'm sure you're talking about America here.
Yes, I am.
In America, we've had some polarizing leadership for sure.
Well, I think it's bad leadership.
And
we haven't had good leadership for a really long time.
when did we?
Like I said,
I
Yeah.
want you to go back. I want you to think back and tell me where good leadership existed.
I have tried to, and Dwight Eisenhower, but then I was a little kid then, and so how would I even know?
Right. Again, it's the notion of good.
Right.
So now we're back to looking at every human being as
Harry
being...
Truman. A lot of people still say he was evil.
And his,
And he dropped the bomb.
he gave him hell.
He did.
He instilled hell for some people.
Yes, he most certainly did.
So when we back up to really look at, good leader or bad leader, it's very difficult to qualify a person as good or bad, and I think that's where we go awry sometimes in our perspective and our assessment, because we give up before knowing the wholeness. And one thing I've always learned from you, but I watch this block also. You've always shown us to be friends with anyone, all walks of life, that everyone has their value, that everyone is beneficial. At the same time,
And they can all be fun,
yes. At the same
but
time,
sometimes not.
I have seen you willing to dismiss outright entire groups of people, politicians and lawyers, as like they could all go. And, jokes aside, it's a split. It's your ego's perspective and your soul's perspective, both coming out. And I learned both of those sides of the coin from you. So for me, listening to the soul and listening to the ego was a resource in my house, because you demonstrated both. At different times in my life, you represented both sides of that coin. You had very good friends that were lawyers. At the same time, you were saying, kill all lawyers. Tongue in cheek.
Well, they couldn't help it. And
that they were lawyers.
And one of the rules of life is never ever encourage anyone to become a lawyer. That's a great rule.
Is that why I never became one? Because I always wanted to be.
You did want to be, and that was, I discouraged that.
Instead, I sit here, weighing the laws of man and the laws of the universe. Those were the two things I wanted to be: a lawyer or an Episcopal priest. Those are.
Wow.
Look at those extremes.
I never knew that one.
You didn't?
No, I didn't know that one. Women couldn't be then.
You could
be a deacon.
No, there was one.
Was there?
There was one at St. Paul's.
Really? I never knew
And
that.
I really liked her. Or at least I thought I could.
Yeah.
We've talked about that before. I did not feel limited by my female, being female. I never did feel like I could not do something.
Well, I remember when you took debate, and remember thinking, boy, this was a mistake.
You didn't enjoy that resource in my...
The last thing in the world I want to do is get in a debate with you all the time, always. And you were a good debater. So
I think that...
So we did battle at times.
A lot of battle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we continue to talk issues through with maybe the rules of debate, where you are respectful to the argument. I know that I couldn't do that as a teenager, but I think I've taken that resource, the skill set from debate, and implemented that into how I argue, or how I do have a difficult discussion. So even if I come up against somebody else's trigger, I'm not going in on my own. And I know if I feel mine showing up, to back out of the conversation before it gets ridiculous, because my triggered self makes no sense at all. And I know this. Just the resource of knowing yourself, the resource of understanding the way you act and react, what triggers you, what brings you joy, those things just help maintain equilibrium in your day. Keeping a close eye on values reminds us that when we want to throw away a whole group of people, that they all have a story and they all have their own unique thing that's...
Yeah, you still go back and listen to them individually, and I mean, if they as a group really go against my basic feelings, then I tend to stay away from them. But I'll still listen to them individually.
Yes. And it's interesting.
I just won't listen to the whole story.
Right. You can't listen to the loud echo. You can't listen to the chants and the buzzwords. But an individual's perspective and why leads you to their raw material, which lets you see the contrast in your own, why you believe what you believe and why they believe what they believe. And as long as you can view another human being as another intelligent being, it's easy to take those things.
Some more than others.
Absolutely. But it's easy to take in where they are instead of expecting them to be at a different space, and recognizing that being a resource comes in so many forms. I mean, think about your own grandchildren, how often they have taught you something or brought something, when all they do is come over and make a mess and eat all your food. And
they can be pretty resourceful. They're very
Absolutely.
resourceful in how they go about things, and it's fun to watch that. It's real fun to watch that.
Any final words on?
Just that resources exist everywhere. And when you least expect it, here comes another one. And it's just everything you learn. Everything you learn along the way becomes then a resource for your future actions and yes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for once again being here. I hope you will join me for another session during next session.
Sure. No, it's fun. I like it.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week for Aligning with Intention.